The first thing you probably think of when you hear the term toll booth is the great inconvenience of being interrupted during your trip to pay a small fee just to get through. It's that mental image of a clogged freeway with cars jammed together in long lines, each driver cursing their luck. But for me, the toll booth I work at is nothing like the chaotic, frustrating toll stations on busy highways. In fact, it's nothing like what you'd expect a toll booth to be at all. It's located on a small, winding country road that winds its way through dense woods. There are no bustling highways around, no nearby bustling towns. Just a quiet, secluded road that disappears into the shadows of the forest. The air feels thicker out here, heavy with an eerie stillness that seems to settle over everything. The toll booth I operate is more of a shack, an old wooden structure with chipped paint, and a sign above the door that reads 25 cents. It's an amount that hasn't changed in decades, probably since the 50s. I don't think anyone actually believes it's meant to collect tolls at this point. Rather, it has become a forgotten relic of a time long past, with its only accessory being the barrier arm I'm tasked with raising or lowering. The interior is bare, with just a single chair and an overhead light, the only source of illumination for miles. The light buzzes faintly, adding a low hum that punctuates the silence of the night. There's something oddly nostalgic about it, but eerie too. The booth looks like it was once full of life, a symbol of a thriving town that time and progress have since left behind. Now it stands like a monument to forgotten duties, forgotten people. You see, the booth sits at the intersection of two worlds, one mundane and the other far darker. This isn't just a job, it's a responsibility no one talks about. The locals don't even like mentioning the booth, and there's an unspoken rule to avoid discussing anything related to it. Over the years, rumors have circulated that strange things happen here at night, but no one ever speaks openly about it. Everyone in the town knows there's something off about this place, something beyond the ordinary, something terrifying. You can feel it in the air, in the way the trees seem to whisper as the wind stirs them, in the way the moonlight dances across the worn planks of the booth. But despite all that, the job isn't one people fight to get. It's one of those odd positions that gets passed down like a family heirloom. And most people around here understand the importance of keeping quiet. Many people have seen things they can't explain, things they wish they hadn't. But that's the way it's always been. If you've seen it, you keep it to yourself. Talking about it is not only dangerous, but it also makes you a target one that you don't want to be. Now, you may be wondering why anyone would bother to maintain a toll booth in such a remote location. After all, it's not as if people are rushing to pay a toll here. You'd be lucky if one car passes through in an entire night. The road is narrow, twisting, and hidden deep within the woods. But there's a reason the government keeps this booth in operation, and it's not about collecting money. The toll has always been a token, a symbolic gesture. Money isn't the currency that matters here. Something else entirely holds value. The truth is, there's something else here. Something worth far more than mere dollars. Something you wouldn't understand until you've spent a night out there alone on this strange road. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's something ancient. Something that has been here long before the booth was ever built. I can feel its presence, as if it's waiting for someone to slip up, waiting for someone to make the wrong move. Our little town seems to be doing much better than surrounding areas, considering the economic state of the region. Our schools are well funded, there are jobs for everyone, and the infrastructure is remarkably well kept. For a rural town in a mostly forgotten part of the country, we seem to have a lot of resources. But it doesn't come from the usual sources, property taxes, or local industry. No, it comes from somewhere else. I've got a feeling that the government, or perhaps something else entirely, is funneling money into this town. Maybe they're keeping track of the toll booth, or perhaps they've got another agenda altogether. I can't say for sure, but I've had my suspicions for a while now. Still, it's not the money that matters. The real reason the booth is here, the reason we continue to maintain this strange outpost, is much darker than anything I could explain without you hearing the full story. It's been passed down through the years, this secret. It's embedded in the very foundations of the booth, in the warped wood that creaks when there's no wind. And if you're lucky, or unlucky, enough to be working here on the wrong night, you might just stumble across it. Each night, there's one attendant. Me, most of the time. I arrive an hour before sunset, as required, and I stay at the booth until at least an hour after sunrise. I'm not allowed to leave the booth for any reason. The sheriff or one of his deputies will give me a ride there and pick me up in the morning. I've never once been tempted to abandon my post, despite the strange things that happen out there. The cold, oppressive silence that sets in around you is enough to drive anyone mad if they're not prepared for it. But even so, I have to stay. I've been told the consequences for leaving, and they are not pleasant. I'm also not allowed to use any electronic devices while on duty. No phones, no radios, nothing that could connect me to the outside world. The only thing allowed in the booth is a flashlight, and if I accidentally bring in a phone or other device, I must turn it off immediately and hide it away. If I make the mistake of leaving it on, I've learned the hard way that it will eventually begin to scream. The noises are incomprehensible, horrifying, but once you've heard them, you can't unhear them. The first time it happened, I couldn't take it. The sounds were so overwhelming, so disturbing, that I stomped my phone into the ground to stop it. I've never made that mistake again. Now, let's talk about the drivers who arrive at the booth. It's rare, but sometimes a car will appear during the night. I've learned not to be too surprised when one rolls up. But the odd thing is, the people who arrive don't seem to know how they got there. They're confused, often anxious, even paranoid. I've seen the looks in their eyes vacant, glazed over like they've been walking in a dream for too long. Some of them mutter to themselves. Others stare at the road like they've never seen it before. Most of them don't even notice the booth at first. They stop, blink, and then roll up slowly, as if trying to make sense of what they're seeing. But the worst part, they never remember the toll. They'll sit there, hands shaking, looking at the sign, the barrier arm, like it's the first time they've seen any of it. They'll fumble for change, trying to pay the 25 cents, but they can never find it. It's like they've forgotten how to function normally. It's eerie, like they've been pulled from somewhere else and deposited here, lost. One night, a man came through who looked even more disoriented than usual. His car was dusty, covered in leaves, and his clothes were torn, as if he'd been walking through the woods for days. His eyes were wide with fear, and when he saw the booth, he gasped and pulled over abruptly. I remember he just stared at me for a long time, not saying anything, just shaking his head. "I don't know how I got here," he whispered. "I've been driving for hours, I think, but it feels like I'm not even on the road anymore." I didn't know how to respond. What do you say to someone like that? He handed me the money, if you can even call it that, and I let him through. But I swear, when I lowered the barrier, I saw something shift in the woods just beyond him, something dark and tall, like a figure just out of reach. The man didn't seem to notice it, but I did. And as he drove off, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him. That's when I realized it. The toll booth isn't just a place to collect money. It's a gate, a barrier between the living and something much worse. And sometimes, those who pass through don't make it out. If you ever find yourself on that road, be careful. You might not be alone. It's as if the road itself disorients them. The moment they drive up, something about this stretch of dark, twisting path leaves them unsettled. They glance in the rearview mirror, unsure of how they even got here, or worse, what's behind them. Some of them are calm, barely paying attention as they pull up to the booth, but most of them are visibly distressed. And that's when things start to get strange. I ask for the toll in my usual monotone voice. "That'll be a quarter, please," I say. It's not much, but it's all I can ask for. I can see the confusion in their eyes, especially when they hesitate, as though they're unsure whether they're meant to pay. Some try to act normal, pulling out a coin, handing it over with a nervous laugh, as if the situation were somehow absurd. But others? They freeze. Their hands tremble, and they look at me like I'm the one who's out of place. They don't know it yet, but the road has already started to claim them. And that's when I know it's time to act. If they're calm, if they hand me a regular quarter or don't react at all, I'm supposed to turn them away. The barrier stays down, and I politely ask them to leave. "Sorry, you can't pass through. Please turn around." There's a reason for this, though. A good one. Because the last thing anyone needs is to let someone through without understanding why they're on this road in the first place. I can't let them pass without knowing. I have to be sure. But then there are those rare moments, those times when everything shifts. Sometimes, the person, whether they're calm or hysterical, will suddenly snap. It's like something triggers in their mind. They blink, their expression changing in an instant. They're not here anymore. Their eyes widen, and something deep inside them wakes up. As if by instinct, they reach into their pocket or bag and pull out a black coin. I've seen it so many times now that I no longer question it. I know what it means. I've learned the hard way, through the years, what this coin represents. It's the price for passing through. When I see that coin, I don't hesitate. I take it from their trembling hand. I don't make them explain it. The moment they hand it over, I raise the barrier. The sound of it lifting is oddly mechanical, detached from the situation at hand. And then they drive off, no hesitation, no second thoughts. They don't look back. Not even once. Sometimes they're crying, their face twisted in a mix of terror and resignation. Sometimes they're calm, as though accepting their fate. But either way, they never look back. And I'm left standing there, watching their car disappear into the dark trees, heading down that narrow road until it's swallowed by the shadows. And then, they are gone, never to be seen again. At first, I didn't understand who these people were. I didn't know why they had these coins, where they got them, or even what they meant. But as time passed, things started to fall into place. Everything became clear one night when I saw a man's face on the local news. He had died in a car accident just hours before. When I saw his face, I froze. That was the same man who had passed through the toll booth the night before. I had been the last person to see him. He was dead, but he had passed through, just like all the others. It took me a while to connect the dots, but eventually, it became undeniable. The road they drive on this road isn't just a stretch of blacktop that leads somewhere. It's a path between worlds. A road that leads somewhere beyond our understanding. Somewhere the living aren't meant to go. The man wasn't the first to pass through, and he certainly won't be the last. As the months passed, I realized the truth: this road is a gateway. Those who drive down it aren't just lost. They're already dead. They don't realize it until it's too late. And once they pass through, that's it. They're gone. Forever. That's when I started to understand the true purpose of my job. It's not about collecting tolls. It's not about making a living or doing something mundane. My role is much more important than that. I'm here to make sure the dead pass through. Because once they've crossed that threshold, there's no turning back. Once they're gone, that's it. They can never return. And I've seen the same thing happen so many times that it no longer shocks me. But then there was one thing I wasn't prepared for. The man who never left. It was decades ago. I remember it as though it were yesterday, another night. Another car driving up to the booth. But this time, there was something different about him. He was an outsider, someone who didn't know about the road. He didn't understand the toll. He was just desperate for a shortcut, and he didn't care what kind of road he had to take. He tried to force his way through, pushing me out of the way and raising the barrier himself. He didn't ask questions. He didn't think about the consequences. He just wanted to get through. I tried to stop him, but he was relentless. He wasn't afraid. It was like he didn't understand what he was doing. He kept pushing, and eventually he broke through. At that moment, I knew something was off, but it wasn't until the next night that things took a turn for the worse. The same man returned. The same face, the same car. But when he reached the booth, he didn't remember a thing. He didn't remember trying to force his way through. He didn't recognize me. He didn't even recall the booth from the night before. He was like a blank slate. He handed me a black coin just like everyone else and passed through. And so it went on, night after night. Every night, he returned. Same man, same car. And every time, it was as if he had no recollection of the previous night. He was trapped in a cycle, an endless loop of forgetfulness. He never aged. He never changed. He just kept coming back, repeating the same events over and over again, caught in a never-ending loop. It's a fate worse than death. Trapped in time, unable to escape, unable to remember what happened or why. He's never left, and I wonder if that's worse than being dead. But it doesn't stop there. Sometimes, something far more terrifying shows up. I'll never forget the first time I heard something coming from the woods. It was late, well past midnight, and I was about to settle into my seat in the booth when I heard it. Hoofs, clopping on the road. Slowly at first, then faster and faster, like something was running toward me. I grabbed my flashlight, my heart pounding in my chest. I stepped outside, praying it wasn't a wild animal. But when I turned on the beam of light, my breath caught in my throat. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was something that didn't belong. A creature tall, impossibly thin, with eyes that burned like yellow coals. It stared at me, its gaze cold and calculating, unblinking. I froze. Not a single muscle in my body moved. I didn't dare breathe. After what felt like hours, it slowly retreated back into the trees. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that it's still out there watching, waiting. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it comes from or what it wants. All I know is that it's part of this road, this twisted, impossible road. And I've learned to never look too closely at it. I just raise the barrier, take the toll, and let it go on its way. Sometimes, I wonder if I'm part of this cycle too. I wonder if one day I'll be the one in the car, passing through the toll booth, and not even remember how I got there. Maybe I've been here longer than I know. Maybe I'm just another soul caught in the web of this cursed road. Maybe that's why I stay. Maybe that's why I've never once left.